Greetings LinkedIn and welcome to another Vertiv LinkedIn Live discussion. My name's Andrew Donoghue and I head up Analyst Relations and Market Intel for Vertiv. Hope everyone's having a good January so far, all things considered. We're going to do our best today to help you back into the swing of things with what we'll hope will be an engaging and fun discussion over the next 40 or 45 minutes or so. As this is a LinkedIn Live session, we really want your feedback though through the session, so feel free to post to the comments section, including whether you disagree or agree with our panel and any other thoughts you've got. The focus of today's session is, as the title suggests, what's coming down the track in 2021 for the data center and digital infrastructure industries. We're going to be drawing on Vertiv's annual data center research to help shape today's conversation. So if you haven't seen those trends, please check them out on vertiv.com, and we'll also post them to the comments section of this session. For those of you who are not familiar with the annual trends, they're assembled based on input from subject matter experts across Vertiv, some of whom we're lucky enough to have with us today. We'll dive into a lot more depth very soon, but at a high level, this year's trends are digitalization on fast forward, data centers reach utility-like status, bringing large data center capabilities to small spaces and the edge, the 5G conversation turns to energy consumption and efficiency, and finally, sustainability comes to the forefront. Before we kind of go into those trends in a bit more depth, I'd like to give our panel the opportunity to quickly introduce themselves, say where they're based, and in keeping with our New Year theme, hopefully share a personal New Year's resolution with us. Panel, I'd also like you to think about a New Year's resolution for the data center industry as a whole, which we'll kind of revisit at the end. I'd also encourage everyone here today to think about their own New Year's resolutions and obviously post those to the comment section. To kick things off, my New Year's resolution is to try and stop trying to multitask while on conference calls or online meetings or LinkedIn Live meetings. It apparently adds to stress and isn't actually that productive. And I think also it kind of goes to home life as well, and trying to focus on one thing while you're doing it, like playing with your kids and not just being distracted by your phone. So that's mine. So let's kick off with Robert. If you'd just like to kind of tell us a bit more about yourself, Robert, and your focus area and what your resolution might be. Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andrew. Andrew, first of all, good luck with your New Year's resolution. I think you won't last very long with that, especially by my own experience. So first of all, yes, thank you for inviting me to do this. My name's Robert Linsdell. I look after the ANZ region, so probably luckier than most because it's summer here and we're having a really nice weather spell at the moment. My New Year's resolution is really easy, to be honest. It's just to have more fun. I mean, last year was really quite a torrid year. I've been on the planet for quite some time, so I have never really ever experienced anything quite like that. So yeah, easy for me. I'm going to have more fun. Great, thanks, Robert. And now over to Angie.
Yes, hi, thank you, Andrew, for having me. And I'm Angie McMillan, and I am the Vice President and GM for Vertiv's IT Management Systems business. I reside in Columbus, Ohio, in the United States, and my New Year's resolution this year is one way or the other, I'm going to find a way to see my team live, or some portion of my team live and in person, and not through this video chat. While it works great, there's something about just sitting there live with your friends.
And Raphael.
Hello everyone. My personal resolution for this year for sure is that I love to cook to my family. I missed this moment during the last year, so this year I want to spend much more time cooking to my family and enjoy the time with them. That's my personal resolution for this year. We already started.
Fantastic, fantastic. Lots of positive resolutions there, which is really good to hear. And obviously, we encourage you to post yours to the comments section as well. So let's kind of move this on and look into our first trend, which is digitalization on fast forward. As with a lot of topics, The Economist is my kind of go-to to try and dig into an area, and they've actually coined quite an interesting term for this whole phenomenon, which is tech acceleration, kind of describes the rapid adoption and reliance on digital infrastructure we've witnessed over the last 12 months or so. Other kind of insights come from consultancies like McKinsey, who say recent data shows that we've vaulted 5 years forward in consumer and business digital adoption in a matter of weeks, during last year. So lots of dramatic adoption there. Question I'd like to hear from the panelists is kind of from their region, vertical technology area, how are they seeing evidence of this kind of digitalization and what do they think it means for the future? Do they think this is kind of a bit of a short-lived thing, or are we going to see some kind of snapback, or have things changed for good? Just trying to get some, specific details around how they are perceiving this kind of digitalization on fast forward. I'd like to direct that question at Angie to kick us off, please.
Yeah, sure. The pandemic, it's interesting, and it's going to have a lasting effect really on how people work, how they live, how children are educated, and the IT ecosystem supporting all this, what I call X from home or from wherever you are, is really been interesting. And while certainly everyone's eager to get kind of past post-pandemic and back to some sense of an easier way of life and normalcy, it's not going to be the way it was entirely, right? There are some of these elements that have really changed the way we work and live that are going to become permanent. And so to give an example, there's many, but telehealth is one of the first ones that comes to mind. A year ago, you couldn't necessarily, and maybe it occurred in some places, some remote places where you could speak to a healthcare provider virtually if they had it set up and arranged. And now it's everywhere. And in fact, I know my healthcare provider, it's encouraged as a first line. You call in and they're saying, have you tried a virtual visit? It's become the norm with operating with healthcare. And there's a number of other examples, but our day-to-day lives have fundamentally changed. And you couple that with the continued growth, which was before the pandemic, certainly occurring now, with IoT, there's more data, we've got more devices. I mean, there's 5 within reach of me right now, and then this is further going to be enabled with all the 5G deployments, which will continue to occur. So, there's more of a new normal, and I know that's a phrase that gets used a lot, but it really is true. I think your examples about that fast forward 5 years and 8 weeks, I think we all felt it, the jolt of that, where, I say it used to be maybe more of a, a push, and now it's a pull, right? Everyone's pulling for that because that need is there and so great. One of the trends we saw immediately was the demand as a result of that, and particularly right at the beginning of the pandemic, was this demand for secure and remote access, monitoring and management of that need for it to be offsite, little to no touch as much as possible, and remote as possible, right? This is where the word essential came from, for that need of only what is essential. But what was interesting is during lockdown, the companies didn't necessarily, they certainly didn't have people on site, and they didn't necessarily want others on site either unless it was essential, but they found that they had some systems that were completely outdated, and it didn't enable them to do this offsite monitoring, or not as effectively perhaps as they needed. And there were some that never planned for it. Their business model didn't plan for people to be working remotely, and how do they have an infrastructure that's going to support that? And so they were caught really kind of flat-footed and behind in that regard. And so that the tools and capabilities to do that, what may have been good enough or maybe nice to have now become a necessity for operation and a requirement going forward to ensure the success of all these distributed networks, because they will remain distributed. And so, what were expectations and requirements have certainly changed. You still need speed, absolutely have to have the security. Coming back to that telehealth example, that has to be secure. It has to be high resolution and pretty darn good as well. It can't afford latency, right? So all of these are now must-haves. And then you couple that with the sophistication of the data that's changing in analytics, and it's really a permanent shift that I see occurring in the market that was just further enabled by what we all lived through in 2020. Back to you, Andrew.
Great. That's a really good point, actually. And I think we've certainly seen from the analyst community a lot of discussion around maybe a differentiation between digital transformation, which we've seen over the last few years, this kind of shift towards digital infrastructure for productivity gains, towards this idea of kind of digital resilience. So how digital infrastructure actually provides resilience, backup, continuity through disruption. And that's certainly, we've seen both those things kind of acting in tandem over the recent past. And I think that's, this kind of focus on digital resiliency is definitely one that is going to continue in the future. So any other thoughts there, local kind of color examples from Raphael or Robert?
I think we have seen a few things over here, and in particular, I think some areas, the developing world actually suffered in a lot of with a lot more difficulty than some of the more developed countries. So, for instance, some of the communications networks were really challenged, and also the way some people live. I mean, here we all are, working from home, and we have quite a lot of space around us, and it's quiet. Some of the challenges that we saw as people went into this COVID was that they were living with lots of families, not so many rooms, and poor connectivity. It really created some productivity challenges for businesses. So I think what we've seen there is that a lot of governments have recognized the importance to maintain businesses, to keep them running, and there's been quite a lot of stimuli to actually help companies work through these communications and data requirements on their businesses.
Yeah, and it's a very good point, Robert. And we have to be aware as society that we don't extenuate this kind of idea of any kind of digital divide out there, because as digital infrastructure becomes even more important, everyone should have equal access to it. Great. That was really good input from everyone. Okay, so let's move on to the next trend. So this is data center reaches utility-like status. It's kind of quite well aligned with the previous trend. There's quite a lot to unpick around it, I think, though, and you can interpret it in a couple of different ways. Firstly, on a basic level, data centers and digital infrastructure become even more critical, as we kind of heard and all witnessed over the recent past. The best way to maybe illustrate that is to imagine what would happen if COVID had hit 10, 20 or 30 years ago with all sorts of the kind of without the digital infrastructure, social platforms, as well as the fiber mobile connectivity we've got in place today. It would be a pretty different situation. So data centers have become much more important and visible to society, which is a positive for the industry, not just in terms of revenue creation, but also softer aspects such as maybe even attracting talent into the industry, because everyone's pretty more aware of what a data center actually is right now. The second take on this is, though, what does this increased reliance mean in terms of how digital infrastructure is classified? Should it be seen as utility, or even this kind of related area of critical national infrastructure? And that has kind of positives, but also some perhaps sort of challenges for the industry as a result. We start to think about things like minimum quality of service, data privacy, data security, and digital sovereignty. So I'd like to punt that one over to Robert to kick us off. Do you think kind of data centers should be moving towards, or should be kind of classified, or are indeed this kind of utility-like status, and is that necessarily a positive or a negative for the industry?
Well, I actually think that I would argue that they're already there. I think we can see, I mean, when you just have to look back at what happened last year, and then I guess in certain companies, I mean, we were very lucky, maybe because we're a technology company, we'd already converted over to a lot of the collaborative tools that really work easily and work well. And I often relay the story when I'm asked this question: how important is the data center? How important is how important are communications? I'll take particularly ANZ because obviously I was here. On the Friday, we had our Prime Minister announced quite fondly that he was going to watch the football the following day. And COVID was, really starting to ramp up. We'd seen it in China. People were starting to talk about it. By Saturday morning, he'd obviously realized, he'd been advised it's probably not the best thing and the smartest thing to do. By Sunday, a number of the state leaders had opted unilaterally outside of the federal government to say, what, we're closing our states. By Monday, he said, well, hang on a second, I'm in charge. By Tuesday, we were locked down. And so our business operated on the Friday. We were still going in. There was we may have been operating A and B teams. By Tuesday, we were all working from home. The business actually continued. We had some glitches. Some people's connectivity, the IT team were having to keep people running. But pretty much by the end of the week, we were operating at 98%, 99% effectiveness because of the collaboration tools, because all our systems worked really very well. And we weren't alone on that. We weren't alone on that at all. And what was even more impressive, I think, is that, the whole network, because obviously we operate with Southeast Asia, we work with China, all these areas operated as well. And so Australia and New Zealand, they were pretty much in hard lockdown between March and say July, August, started to get a little bit of release there. Throughout that whole period, our communications networks, and I'm talking now for the whole country, in the region, they operated. NBN upped the power ratings by about 20% so people could remain connected. The cities were empty, so that meant everybody was working from home and the roads were empty. So is it a utility or a critical infrastructure? Yes, it's definitely a critical infrastructure. Is it a utility? Well, let me put it this way. Let's think about it at home. One of the questions I get is Dad, it's not that the water's not running or the power's not running. It's Dad, the internet's not running. And so to answer your question, I believe very much that it is a utility. It is absolutely essential now to our daily offering in life.
No, it's a very, very good point. That home example is a good one, actually. Angie, Raphael, any other comments from kind of local perspective on this kind of utility-like status?
Go ahead, Angie, please.
Oh, thanks. I was just going to build upon what Robert said with an example or two very similar. My team and I've often joked throughout the past year, particularly when we have like summer storms, in the US and things like that, and power can go out. And there were a number of times, particularly my team in Alabama, they get some pretty big storms, and their power go out or my power go out, and it was okay. I have a small UPS here or something like that. But boy, if the internet went down, we were all you felt blind, couldn't do anything, and it was like the dependency on that was tremendous. And to couple with that, in my own neighborhood where I live, we have our own little social media page. I think a lot of places do that, where you live and connect with your neighbors and things. And it blows up when is everybody's internet down, or is it just mine? And there's all these like questions going on. Is it just me? Do I, or is it widespread? Am I alone here? And there was a little bit of panic about it. When the power goes out after a storm or something, it was like, it's okay, they'll fix it. So it really shows how much, our daily lives, it's intertwined, and that dependency that we have that, we're not used to thinking about it as a utility, but when you get to the bare bones of it, it really is.
No, absolutely.
Great. I would like just to add is the data center industry and the communication network have been important for the world, but after the pandemic situation we have lived, the data center industry become much more relevant, not only for the companies, but for the people in the day by day. The first time the data center communication network has been recognized by the government, by the companies, and by the population how important is the data center industry for all the world to run well. So I really believe there is now a strong spotlight in the data center industry, and the data center industry and communication network really got a new level of relevance for the people and population in general.
It's a really good point, and I think, yeah, no one's going to deny how critical the data center and digital infrastructure is. It's just interesting to think about what the ramifications that may have in the future in terms of legislation or regulation, especially around kind of things like quality of service delivery, but also maybe even sustainability and carbon and energy targets, and whether those will be kind of more scrutinized given this kind of shift in emphasis and how much more attention the data centers is getting as a result. But we'll touch on those a little bit later.
Yeah, Andrew, just a quick question on that, just still on the same subject. Have any of you guys experienced any governments actually saying, having a bill that passes data centers and communications networks as part of the critical infrastructure? Last month, well, actually about 6 months ago, the Prime Minister here, they announced that they wanted to add data centers and communications networks to the critical infrastructure list. And then they're looking to pass a bill that was actually announced in Parliament about sometime early December last year. So we anticipate that will actually be passed in bill that data centers are so important. Has anybody else seen that in any other countries, or is Australia? I think Australia has really sort of realized, with it being a little bit remote here, how important it is to have this. Otherwise, we can't trade with the rest of the world because it's an island. Have you seen that, Ange, or Rafael?
I've not yet. I think some of the primary focus would be around, for us about the grid, first of all, some age and how do we do some things about that, or, some of the sustainability things that impact data centers, what around, water and usage and power usage. So I see it happening in that area first, but not specific yet to data centers. Now, I'm not going to say I'm up on all the laws, but I haven't seen it that specific yet here.
Yes, I have not seen any specific regulation, but I do expect that new obligations and new regulation for the sustainability side, and even for the oncoming 5G technology, I do expect new obligations and regulations should come for the countries in Latin America with the new technology arrive. In the end, it's with much more service being used by the population and by the companies, we should expect much more regulation and obligation on the coming future. Yeah,
no, it's a good point. Yeah, I think there's been a lot of discussion about it in the UK, for example, and I do know that during COVID, data center staff were classified as key workers, which enabled them to kind of travel around during the pandemic, but also, for their kids and stuff to get school support, etc. But interestingly, consultants, I think, weren't, or some of the consultancies. So yeah, there's some kind of challenges around how these things get applied and who gets included. So let's move on to the third trend here, which is bringing large data center capabilities to small spaces and the edge. One of the impacts of this kind of increasing digitalization that we referred to already is obviously going to bring growth from the core to the edge, and I think what we're kind of witnessing or expect to see in the future is more maturing of the edge from being a concept expectation a few years ago to starting to see more actual edge deployments happening. Obviously there's a continual discussion around how you classify and describe the edge, but we probably don't want to get too much into that right now. I think in 2021, we expect to see an increased focus on bringing sort of hyperscale enterprise level capabilities to these edge sites. And those could be a mixture of net new edge related to telco and 5G build-outs, or could also be maybe upgrading, retrofitting what may be considered kind of local server closets and rooms. Edge covers a lot of different infrastructure types. But what we kind of expect to see is edge infrastructure will become more robust and sophisticated, and we're going to have remote visibility across systems, increasing options for remote IT management. So could the panel try and give an example they've seen of a recent edge deployment they've been aware of, or have heard around, and then kind of comment on some of the opportunities and challenges that the edge presents in terms of deployment and management. And maybe Angie could kick us off there.
Sure. Andrew, I think we could probably take a whole session and talk about nothing but the edge, right? When I think back around, the Vertiv Data Center 2025 research that we did, I think 53% of our respondents expect at least 100% increase in their edge sites by 2025. And if I compare that with even Omdia's recent report, they highlighted by 2024 about $3 billion in revenue, which is up, 22.6% of the total infrastructure revenue will be located out at the edge, which is up from 1.5 million, so double from where it was in 2019. So I think we all realized we were living at the edge. The pandemic, we already talked about this. It accelerated us. We felt that jolt forward, and so that again, that's not going to stop. It's going to continue, and the data says that that's going to continue. Again, back to the expansion of IoT devices and data. 5G is a key enabler with a lot more data and compute power that's required to go with that. And it's going to be, where people are, where they live, where they work. It's that whole shift forward. So, you highlighted that edge has some different definitions and a sort of, is it location or where it resides, but it's all of these things. And the examples are absolutely everywhere, and we've just accelerated. So I think I'll spend more time talking about what are the opportunities and challenges. As the edge sites grow, they require really many of the same capabilities that you see in the core sites, but you've got less space, right? They still want to be able to remote monitor and have those capabilities to access, whether that's IT monitoring and secure control of the servers, or it's monitoring of the critical, power and thermal properties of the infrastructure. But you can't send service trucks to every edge site. It's not scalable, practical, or economical. So you have to do it differently. And that's driving a lot of innovation, whether, again, it's IT management type of products or the physical infrastructure type of products, which have to adapt to not only support the evolving spatial requirements, and this is where we see high density coming in because you've got a lot less space, but higher compute power, but the requirement demands that are out at the edge, what we really have to do to align and coming back to that sustainability and reliability needs. So the requirements get a lot more stringent from my perspective on how you do that in these new environments. One of the I guess evolutions from that, and we've seen some of this already, but I think where we're going to see the growth is the change in form factors to from what did you call it, like the traditional IT closets that you mentioned earlier, Andrew. There's going to be a rapid growth that's there, and so you have to have really quick deployments and flexible, scalable solutions is what my team and I talk about often, that work for the needed space at the edge and the customers as they need it. To support all of those changes, higher compute power, resiliency, speed, security. We talk about this again and again because it's so important. One of the key changes that's going to emerge from that as well is these all-in-one prefab modular designs. And those are going to be used at the edge, right? Whether it's a single rack micro data center, if you will, or the containerized designs all the way to prefab approaches for larger edge sites. I think those are going to be, absolutely paramount and an enabler to get something that's there quickly. And those complexities, I think, I'm talking about the needs at the edge and the innovation that's going to occur. But how do you deploy that and reach all of these customers? So I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the fact that, you know, our channel partners are going to have a much greater role to play in order to execute all of this. You know, the new digital technology and solutions aren't necessarily the same as what skill sets end users have and an understanding for those. There's a lot of questions about it. How do I get it quickly? You know, and our partners can help bridge the gap between the known and the unknown. I also see that they can add a value to those system integrators who are often key to the decision making in the supply chain. And the partners can bring, you know, those customizable or flexible solutions are going to be ahead of the game if they can do that too. So a lot going on at the edge, Andrew. I think, like I said, we keep talking about it, but I tried to put it in some key areas there.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we could definitely hold the whole session just on the edge. Just quickly, maybe, Robert, I know this is a particular specialty for you as well, so don't know if you've got any thoughts you wanted to weigh in with on sort of local observations, local deployments that you may have seen in terms of edge infrastructure.
Yeah, look, I think I'd like to talk a little bit about some examples, but before I do that, if we were to go back a couple of years, I think we were very much in the theoretical stage. There were a few actual cases where people had customers have set up true edge in the way we're seeing it rolling out. But where we see a lot of activity in the region now is logistics centers, not just, you know, the core. We're seeing, you know, big setups with maybe a robotic warehouse, but the distribution warehouses, they may have 2 or 3 rack micro data centers in them, and they can put them into their warehouse with some degree of protection to stop them from getting dirt and dust inside them, without having to build a specific data center. And as Angie mentioned, we can almost wheel them in. We actually put a 4 rack data center into one facility in a week, which, you know, in the old days with a full up data center raised with a raised floor, there's no way that would have happened. We're seeing a lot of them now popping up in exchanges. I think New Zealand were one of the first to do that. I think we put up the first pod in an exchange in Auckland in New Zealand 4 years ago. In fact, it was the first one that went in. China, we're seeing a lot of infrastructure going into, again, logistics centers and exchanges. But one of my favorites at the moment, because we're working on it, is where we're starting to see calculations within a computer network. So for instance, you may have multi-site. Let's say we would have 10 sites, and they're measuring maybe traffic or boat movements or people movements, and they have very small aggregation points, which is a very small micro data center, sometimes with maybe a hybrid power source, usually solar, sometimes wind, but they're remote. They're black spot, and then these are relaying usually through a 4G network at this point in time back to a central aggregation point where the big data is being calculated. And then what we're seeing is the authorities, if it's, because generally this has been government work, are then able to make some calculations and decisions based upon what they're seeing. I can't go into what it is at the moment because it's not being released, but we actually have a couple of applications where there are movements of, as I say, people or maritime or road traffic, where this is going on. I find those kind of applications absolutely fascinating because it's absolute true edge, and it's building up a big data network. So you've got this hybrid combination. At this point in time, they're making the decision actually at the site and then feeding that information back. But we could see, you know, maybe private cloud systems set up, maybe through a cloud provider, because we're starting to see some of those kind of applications, and then linking it all on a backbone of a private network.
Great. Thanks for that input, Robert. Really good. We should keep moving along, just in the interest of time. One thing I'll just say on the edge is that some of you may be unaware that Vertiv produced some research around edge, created these 4 edge archetypes. whether that was kind of life critical or data sensitive or machine to machine. Basically just trying to understand what the edge looks like and kind of categorize more than 150 use cases. We're in the process of kind of revisiting that research, specifically in light of this kind of conversation about what are the real practical deployments we're seeing in edge. And so I think just an FYI to keep an eye out for some interesting research that we will be releasing in the next few months around that area. So let's now move on to the fourth and fifth trends, which we're kind of going to deal with together because they're quite well aligned. And those are energy consumption related to 5G, and sustainability comes to the forefront. So, I think up until now, the 5G discussion has kind of been focused on the ultimate benefits of the technologies, kind of increased bandwidth, reduced latency, and the applications it's going to enable. But as more countries kind of begin to roll out and deploy 5G in earnest, we're going to see that focus shift to some of the related issues around it, including energy and sustainability. I think we're going to see greater focus on those particular areas, and certainly it's an area that Vertiv is exploring in some depth. I think we've already looked into it to some degree. According to a study from 451 Research and Vertiv, majority of operators think their 5G processes era deployments are obviously going to start in earnest in 2021. 88% of respondents planning to deploy 5G this year. But more than 90% of them also think that 5G will result in higher energy costs, and they're pretty interested in technologies and services that will help to improve efficiency and sustainability. But obviously 5G is only one part of this kind of broader sustainability story, which we should also touch on. So just, I think, kicking off with Raphael, could you give us a bit of feedback on what you're seeing in terms of 5G deployments in your region, and whether you are starting to see any kind of focus on energy efficiency, sustainability as part of that yet, and why you think that may be a factor as we kind of see more 5G adopted?
Great question. It's the 5G, it's in Latin America should be a reality for the users in 3 years, I believe, on the next 2 years. Some countries should be early, others later. All the telecom operator and customers, as you said, recognize the energy consumption as the biggest challenge, not only for the infrastructure side, but even to build a business case where the technology become feasible for all the users, for all the peoples. So it's a big impact on the infrastructure and the business case from the telecom operators, how to building the business case and become the technology feasible for all the countries and people in Latin America. We have had many studies and jobs to develop efficient solutions to mitigate the problem of energy consumptions. It has already happened in Latin America, and we have seen the telecom operator try to bring the technology for the large data centers, for the edge data center, and more than that, trying to improve the efficiency of the large data center and create new solutions of ads with much more efficiency. That has been the trend. As I commented in the first question, all the digitalization is bringing a spotlight to the data center industry, and I expect new obligations and regulations in the coming future. What should take care of the sustainability side. We need to recognize the large data center market has done a good job in energy and water consumptions, but for sure, as entire systems, large connection and ads, new regulation challenge should come in to improve the efficiency, to find another ways to source electricity. So new trends, new studies should happen during this year. Looking forward to really improve the efficiency of the new systems ads, and even to improve of the core data center fusions in the market.
Great. Any input from Angie or Robert on kind of either the topics of 5G adoption, sustainable 5G, on all the kind of wider sustainability direction that the industry is taking? Obviously, sustainability isn't a new concept for the data center industry. It's been very proactive on this front for a long time, but definitely there's even more maybe external scrutiny around sustainability than has been before. So just interested to hear any kind of thoughts, comments from your regions or from your kind of technology vertical areas that you focus on.
Yeah, so as I'm sure many of you know, 5G we already have quite a lot of 5G in the region. Australia was one of the first. They for whatever reason they always like to get the network up as quickly as possible. I'm already on 5G. I'm not showing off. It's just that we have it. China also has it. Korea has it. Japan has it. So there are a lot of countries in the region that already have, and it's active, and people are physically using it. And we also know that to transfer a packet of information on 5G, we actually are using less power. They have designed it. The thing is you've got a much bigger pipe, and when you push more information down that pipe, you're going to need a lot more power to drive it. So obviously the DC systems that are powering the mobile phone towers are considerably more powerful than the 2G ones were, the 3G and 4G. But that's the price we pay for trying to cram as much data as fast as we possibly can down a system. We're starting to see people now building true use cases now for 5G for what it was designed for. And we are seeing some prototype now case studies where people are actually physically using 5G because 5G does things quickly and you can pump a whole lot of information through. You get those low latency applications which where they've been practicing with autonomous type vehicles, drones, some really good drone technology being utilized, which utilizes 5G. And I think we'll also see mine sites adopting this quite quickly because they're pumping quite a lot of big data again down through the pipe, which they need quickly. So to sustainability, I might just as well do my New Year's resolution for the data center industry whilst I'm at it, which does revolve sustainability. I think we truly do need to take it seriously. I still feel from the designs we do, there are a lot of things we can do to improve both energy usage, sustainability, and also water usage. But cost still becomes the main paramount deciding factor. And in a number of instances, I would say, in fact, more instances than not, the sustainability piece, it tends to be secondary. It's talked about a lot more, it's thought about a lot more, but ultimately it's still more of a talking point than a walking point. So that's what I would like to see in my New Year's resolution is, let's take this a little bit more seriously, because ultimately, as we use more and more power for data centers, because we're just such, we want to use data, and there are so many applications. And Angie, you've already quoted some figures there on how big the whole IoT market will be in a few years' time. If we don't take sustainability and energy seriously, the use of energy seriously, then we are going to end up with some pretty difficult questions that we're going to need to answer.
Absolutely, yeah. Great summary, Robert. I would just make a couple of comments there. That just to say that I think around this kind of 5G and energy consumption issue, it is an important area that Vert has been focused on, and we're going to be releasing some research actually in the next month or two on that topic exactly, and a particularly important area of not only how telcos can move to 5G in a sustainable way, but then how they can use those 5G services to enable better energy management, improve sustainability in other industries. Because yes, 5G is going to have, is going to increase the amount of the energy intensity of the telcos and data centers to a degree. But we're also going to be mitigating some of the, and kind of offsetting some of the maybe analog other activities that used to happen in other industries, and improve efficiency across those. So there will be gains in the round. So we have to kind of be aware of the whole system. Any other comments anyone would like to add in? Nope. Okay, let's wrap things up then. So this has been a really great session. It really kind of just leaves me to thank the panel for their excellent insights today. But before we kind of wrap things up, we at the top we just said we wanted to kind of focus on a few New Year's resolutions for the industry, and obviously Robert's kind of touched on what he thinks his is. We don't have to cover one each, but we can maybe come up with a few collective ones. I mean, I would kick things off perhaps by saying we should try and sort of tackle this IT facilities gap that's kind of continues in the industry and is responsible for a lot of inefficiencies and costs, and is a kind of a cause of sustainability. And we need better alignment and more holistic thinking between IT and facilities to really improve how the industry operates. That even goes to like a common definition of the data center. Within the IT sphere, it just means a bunch of servers and networking gear hanging in space. Whereas in the data center, within the physical industry, we're focused on the actual physical infrastructure and the buildings and related cooling and power. Another one could be, coming up with a common productivity metric for the data center industry. We're kind of all aware of the shortcomings of power usage effectiveness, but as we kind of focus on sustainability, I think it would be great to have a kind of common way to try to categorize, understand what the output of a data center is, especially when we're trying to understand how sustainable the industry can be. So I don't know if anyone else has got any other thoughts around this.
I have one I would add, and that is, we've talked a lot about the change and how a lot of that's permanent in the expansion out at the edge, and as the resolution really is embrace that change. There are some that may be thinking, do I upgrade now or do I go adopt this? Not everywhere, but there are some that if they're considering it, now is a fantastic time where you're going to be so far behind because of everything that we've talked about today and more that's coming. So 2021, no better time to start, embrace that change and go with it. Look at all of the features, the sustainability and energy is certainly one of those, but the innovation that's coming with it and maybe different ways to solve the problem that we have are going to be paramount. So that's mine.
Fantastic.
Just to add here, I'm with my colleagues here. Just to add, we live in the last year, maybe many years of digital acceleration in the world. So we should to bring on track in the same way sustainability and efficiency for all the systems. That's really important for the market and for the next years in the world. So sustainability and efficiency should be priorities to be on track with all the digitalization we got it in the last 1 year.
Great point to tie us off with, Rafael. Okay, before we sign off, I'd like to remind everyone, if you have time, to try and click on the complete the feedback survey so we can help to kind of continue these events. Thanks again to the panel for their great input today, and look forward to hosting more of these in the future. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.